Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Molly Jacobs had always been a free spirit, and her childhood was full of exploration, fun, and the carefree nature typical of kids her age. She spent countless hours outdoors, climbing trees, running through fields, or splashing in creeks. She felt a deep connection to nature, which only grew stronger as she got older. Her father, Jimmy, was her constant companion on these adventures, teaching her how to fish, hike, and enjoy the simple things in life. They shared many quiet moments, lost in the beauty of their surroundings. But as she entered her teenage years, things began to change. The once close relationship between her and her mother, Linda, which had already been strained, started to unravel even more. As Molly grew up, she became more aware of her mother's strict expectations, which clashed with her free-spirited personality. The tension between them became obvious, especially as Molly began to push boundaries and question the rules Linda had always enforced. Their growing differences set the stage for the conflict that would soon take over their home. Molly Jacobs seemed like any other 15-year-old, constantly at odds with her mother, Linda. Their relationship was full of arguments, as Linda constantly criticized Molly's behavior, her friends, or her fashion choices. Linda's focus on appearances and the family's image in Northfield, Minnesota, was a frequent source of tension. Having struggled in high school herself, Linda was determined to make sure Molly didn't face the same issues, pushing her to fit in with the more popular crowd. However, Linda's attempts to control Molly's life without asking about her feelings or goals only drove them further apart. Molly loved sports and the outdoors. Linda wanted her in orchestra and debate. Molly liked being rebellious, had pierced her left ear as many times as possible, and was thinking about getting a nose ring. Linda refused to allow it and wouldn't sign the permission slip. Molly wanted to dye her hair blue and shave one side, but Linda threatened to ground her for weeks if she did. Molly's dad, Jimmy, was laid back and had learned not to sweat the small stuff. Growing up, he had watched his best friend Van struggle with his own father, a strict, born-again Christian. Van wasn't allowed to wear his hair in the popular long style, and his dad always gave him crew cuts that made him a target for teasing at school. This led to many fights, with Jimmy always backing Van up. Seeing how small issues like haircuts could cause so much trouble made Jimmy realize they weren't worth fighting over. In fact, Jimmy encouraged Molly to express her individuality as long as she wasn't hurting herself or others. No pills, no Zex, no bullying, no lying, no cheating. Those were his rules. If she wanted blue hair, he'd say, "Go for it." If she wanted to pierce her nose, he'd sign the form. Jimmy was easygoing, but he had two firm rules: no lying and always show loyalty. He'd tell Molly, "You have to communicate your feelings. Don't keep secrets." Molly, no, he'd say, "Secrets can eat away at you." They eventually come out, and the longer they're hidden, the more damage they cause. His other rule, loyalty, meant being true to family, friends, and yourself. Be loyal to your morals and your friends. Help them make the right choices and stand by them. Because of these qualities, Jimmy had many friends and a solid reputation as a copyright lawyer. Although his job as a partner in a high-tech law firm kept him busy, he always made time to attend Molly's soccer and softball games and her school events. He also made time for hiking, biking, fishing, kayaking, and camping with her, knowing she was growing up fast and soon wouldn't be around to do those things with him. His wife Linda sometimes joined them, but usually opted out. As a result, Molly and Jimmy formed an incredibly close bond. Linda was somewhat jealous of this, but didn't see the value in the activities they shared. Every Wednesday, Linda had the day off and would tell Jimmy and Molly she'd use the time to cook and freeze meals, catch up on housework, shop, or visit her parents. Many times when Molly came home, she'd see Jimmy's older brother Dan driving away in his pickup. When Molly asked Linda if Uncle Dan had been over, Linda sometimes said no, which seemed odd. Why else would his truck be here, Molly wondered. Other times, Linda said Dan had come by to discuss a landscaping project, borrow tools, or talk to Jimmy. It all seemed a bit strange, but then again, her extended family was odd in general. Linda was usually home before Molly, who arrived around 5:30 after sports practice, and always before Jimmy, who could get home as early as 6 or as late as 9. On this particular day, just after lunch at about 12:30, Molly started having bad menstrual cramps. She asked to see the nurse and convinced her to let her leave early. Molly called her mother, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried again with the same result and left a quick message. "Mom, I'm not feeling well, so I'm leaving school. It's just 10 blocks, so I'll walk. But if you get this, can you pick me up? I'll take Maple Street home. Thanks." Molly walked home and never got a call back. She's probably working out, shopping, or busy, she thought. Figures. She gets mad if I don't answer her calls. But when I call her, nothing. As she rounded the corner of her block, she saw Uncle Dan's truck in the driveway. He must need more tools, she thought. Molly walked up to the house, but the door was locked, which was odd. Instead of ringing the bell, she took out her keys and unlocked the door. The house was dark and quiet. She dropped her backpack and checked the garage for Dan, but it was empty too. As she came back inside, she heard moaning and panting upstairs. Curious, she quietly walked up and down the hallway to her parents' bedroom. She peeked around the door and was shocked to see her mom, Linda, on her knees next to Uncle Dan. Both were moaning. Molly backed away, stunned and crying. She didn't know what to do, but the more she thought about the betrayal, the angrier she became. This time she peeked again with her phone recording. She walked into the room and yelled, "How could you do this to our family? And you, Uncle Dan? You slept with your brother's wife. I hate you both." Dan and Linda, confused at first, recoiled in horror when they saw Molly filming and yelling at them. Molly ran downstairs as Linda screamed, "Oh my God! No! Molly, no! Please come back. It's not what you think. Please, let's talk." She chased after her, but Molly was already out the front door by the time Linda reached the landing. Linda turned to Dan, shouting, "Get dressed and start your truck. We need to catch her. We have to stop her from telling Jimmy. It'll destroy him and he'll eliminate us both. Hurry!" She burst into tears, and Dan yelled, "You can cry later. Get dressed and let's go." Molly ran to the end of the block, crossed the street, and cut through the backyards of 3 more blocks. She didn't know what to do. Her phone rang and she saw it was Linda. She ignored it, and when it rang again a minute later, she still didn't answer. She decided to run the mile to the 9 Mile Creek Nature Trails, a place she and her dad loved to hike. Their favorite spot was in a little grassy area surrounded by 5 massive cottonwood trees. They called it our trees and would sometimes race each other there. Molly sat down behind the trees, put her head on her knees, and cried. How could my mom do this to Dad and me? How could Uncle Dan betray Jimmy like this? She sobbed as tears streamed down her face. She kept ignoring her mom's calls, not wanting to talk, now or maybe ever again. In moments like this, she always reached out to her dad. Meanwhile, Linda had tried calling Molly multiple times with no answer. She finally listened to Molly's voicemail about feeling sick, leaving school, and needing a ride. Linda had been kissing Dan on the couch when the calls came in, assuming it was just Jimmy checking in, so she ignored them. The last thing she wanted was her husband interrupting her. She already felt guilty, but the thrill of the affair kept pulling her in, and she couldn't seem to stop. Linda had been sleeping with Dan behind Jimmy's back for about 10 weeks now. She knew it needed to stop, knew it was affecting her family, and understood it would be a disaster if anyone found out. But she hadn't yet found the strength to end things with Dan and give up her secret. The guilt and thrill of danger kept her hooked. She justified it by thinking no one really needed her anymore, and this was something just for her, believing it wouldn't hurt Jimmy. She didn't realize it was already putting an emotional wall between her and her family, likely from the guilt. If only she had thought about the consequences. How could I be so stupid to risk everything that actually matters to me? Now she despised herself for what she had done. Or maybe she just hated getting caught. She didn't have time to figure that out, but she dreaded having to dig deep to understand why she had taken such risks. Now that Molly had caught her and run off, it hit her how many people would be hurt by her actions, including herself. She never understood how she had let it happen. She loved Jimmy and Molly more than anything, and she realized her affair was eroding her marriage. But she couldn't seem to resist the excitement and lust that came with her secret indulgence. Now, she couldn't bear to think about the likely fallout and how she might have just destroyed the people she loved and, in turn, herself. She frantically called Molly's phone, leaving messages, begging her not to tell Jimmy, as it would destroy him. Molly kept ignoring her mother's calls and decided to call her dad. She dialed him, and he answered on the second ring. "Hey, little rebel woman, what's up? Aren't you in school? Are you okay?" Jimmy immediately heard his daughter sobbing on the other end. "Molly, what's wrong? What happened? Are you hurt? Where are you? Where's your mom?" "Dad, please come quickly. I need you. I'm at the trees. Don't tell Mom, and don't take any calls from her before you get here. Please." "Molly, why? Did you and your mom have a big fight? Are you all right? What's going on? Just come, Daddy. No calls to or from Mom. Please, just hurry. I'm okay. But I need you now. Okay? You stay safe and don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jimmy rushed out of his office, not bothering to explain much to his executive assistant. "I'm out for the day. A client's having a meltdown. I'll fill you in tomorrow." He sprinted to his Porsche SUV. His phone started ringing again, and he saw it was Linda. He ignored it, remembering his promise to Molly. The call stopped, only to ring again immediately. He let it go to voicemail, started the Porsche, and sped out of the parking lot. In his rush across town to the nature center, Jimmy pulled into the parking lot, jumped out, and still in his suit and dress shoes, ran down the path toward their spot. He found Molly curled up in a ball, crying. "Molly, what's wrong?" he asked, crouching beside her. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing even louder, her body trembling. Jimmy stroked her hair and back, trying to calm her. After a few minutes, she started to settle down. "Molly, did someone hurt you? What happened? Did you fight with Mom?" Just as he spoke, Molly's phone rang again. He picked it up and saw it was another call from Linda. He also noticed the string of missed calls. As soon as her phone stopped, his started ringing. It was Linda. He was about to answer, but Molly begged, "No, Dad, don't pick up. We need to talk." "Molly, I don't get it. What's happening? Why don't you want me to talk to Mom?" "Dad, I don't know what to do. You always told me to tell the truth, be loyal to family, and not keep secrets because they eat you up from the inside. But what if the truth is worse? What if it destroys people? Then what?" "Molly, I can see you're hurting, but it's always better to bring the hard truths into the open. That way your family and friends can help you deal with it." "Dad, I'm so sorry." She hesitated, wiping her tears. "Has Mom been calling you? Did she leave a voicemail? Please listen to it." Jimmy looked at her strangely but pulled up the voicemail. "Jimmy, I need to talk to you. Molly and I had a fight and she ran off. She's upset and I don't think she fully understands what she saw. I'm trying to find her. Can you help me? Please tell her to call me and know that I love only you and Molly, always." Molly let out a bitter growl when she heard the message and then said, "Now, let me play you mine." Molly played the first voicemail from Linda, who was sobbing. "Molly, it's not what you think. It meant nothing. Just a harmless, meaningless act. Please call me and talk to me before you do anything rash. Please talk to me before you talk to your dad." Molly shook her head in disbelief and muttered, "Yeah, right." A harmless act. Jimmy, now more confused, asked, "Molly, what's going on?" Molly took a deep breath. "Dad, please bear with me. Let's listen to the next voicemail from Mom." She pressed play again, and Linda's voice was desperate. "Molly, please talk to me. Don't tell anyone, especially your dad. It will destroy him and our family." Molly jumped up, her anger flaring. "Screw you, Mom. You're blaming me? You're saying I'm the one destroying the family? That takes some nerve." Jimmy was now seriously concerned. "Molly, you have to tell me what's going on. Out with it." Molly took a breath and said, "Dad, are you sure you heard her? She's saying it'll destroy the family, but I think she already did that anyway." She hesitated before continuing. "You need to know the truth. I'm so sorry, Dad." She began, "I didn't feel well at school, so I decided to come home early. I called Mom a few times for a ride, but her phone was off. I walked home, and when I got there, Uncle Dan's truck was in the driveway. The front door was locked, so I used my key. No one was downstairs, but I heard noises from your bedroom, so I went upstairs. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry, Dad. For you, for me, for everything. You need to see this. She handed her phone to Jimmy and put her head down on her knees, crying softly. Jimmy played the video, watching in horror as the scene unfolded, Linda and Dan together in his bedroom. The video ended with Molly's anguished cry and the shock and shame on Linda and Dan's faces as they realized they'd been caught. The emotions on their faces, pleasure turning into horror, fear, and guilt, were unbearable to witness. Jimmy turned off the phone, his head sinking to his knees. Tears began to fall. Why, God? Why? How could she do this to us? With my own brother? How could they betray me like this? Molly slid closer to him, putting her arm around his shoulder. I'm so sorry, Dad. I feel the same betrayal and pain. I never want to see either of them again. I hate them for what they've done to us, to you, and for tearing our family apart. Meanwhile, Linda had failed to reach either Molly or Jimmy. She called Jimmy's office, and his assistant told her he had left quickly to see a client. The assistant offered to call him, but Linda declined, panicking more by the minute. Dan and Linda had driven around the neighborhood searching for Molly, but eventually Dan dropped Linda off at the house. He looked at her and said, Let's hope Molly doesn't say anything to Jimmy. You know he'll never forgive us. I have to get to her before Jimmy finds out. I have to convince her this meant nothing, Linda said, her voice trembling with fear. She called Molly again, but it went straight to voicemail. She cried into the phone. Molly, I'm so sorry. Please believe me, it meant nothing. It's over. Please call me before you talk to anyone, especially your dad. It'll destroy everything. Linda got out of the truck and walked into the house, frantic and desperate. She called out for Molly, knowing there'd be no answer. She rushed upstairs, stripped the bed, and replaced the sheets, as she had done every Wednesday for the last 10 weeks. She sat on the edge of the bed, trembling with sobs, questioning how she had let things get this far. Why did I do this? Why risk my marriage and family for something so meaningless? She thought. She didn't even like Dan that much. She certainly didn't love him. Her love for Jimmy had never faded, but her behavior showed how she had emotionally distanced herself. She realized how she had started to nag Molly and stopped being open and loving with Jimmy. When was the last time she had shown him any real affection? What the hell is wrong with me? She thought, trying to piece together when it all went wrong. Then it hit her. It wasn't about Dan. It was about the thrill, the excitement of doing something secret. My life felt boring, and it seemed like no one needed me anymore. Not Jimmy, not even Molly. With her attitude, Molly had pulled away, breaking the bond they once had. Jimmy didn't need extra excitement. He had plenty of it in his fast-paced law career, and he spent what free time he had with Molly. Linda knew their sex life was lacking, but whenever Jimmy tried to discuss it or suggest counseling, she always shut him down, insisting everything was fine. Eventually, he stopped asking, emotionally distancing himself from her. Now Linda realized it was all her fault. Dan, on the other hand, constantly complimented her, telling her how attractive she was. He made her feel needed again, something she didn't get from her husband. Dan wasn't getting the same connection from his wife, Amanda, especially with her being 6 months pregnant with their second child. Their flirting, along with Dan's compliments about her beauty and desirability, had escalated into kissing and touching. It was only a matter of time before it turned into full-blown, lustful sex. Now, Linda couldn't forget the look of hurt, pain, and disgust on Molly's face when she caught them. Molly had called her cheap, and Linda couldn't disagree. She thought about Amanda, about Dan and Jimmy's relationship, about their families. Why am I just now realizing how horrible this is? I've ruined my life without thinking of the consequences. She collapsed onto the bed, curling into a fetal position and sobbing until she cried herself to sleep. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Molly remained by the trees, taking turns crying and talking. What are we going to do, Dad? Molly asked, wiping her eyes. Jimmy shook his head. I don't know, Molly. I feel so much anger and pain. I've been betrayed by the woman I loved and my own brother, who I thought would always have my back. And now you're in the middle of this mess, knowing that our family will never be the same. He sighed deeply. I don't know if I can even look at Linda, much less forgive her. But she's your mom, and you'll always need some kind of relationship with her. That might seem impossible now, but we'll figure it out. For now, let's get a hotel room. Calm down, rest, and deal with everything tomorrow. They drove downtown and booked a suite at the Hilton. Jimmy planned to work from the hotel the next day. call the school to report Molly as sick, and buy some time. They could stay there for a few days while figuring out their next steps. The next day, when Linda went to work, assuming she did, Jimmy would go to the house and pack their clothes for a few days. Jimmy also called his friend Jack Wilson, the district attorney, and briefly explained the situation. He told Jack that Linda might file a missing person report, but assured him that Molly was safe with him and they'd eventually contact her. Jack reluctantly agreed to delay any action, but warned Jimmy he could only hold off until Monday. That evening, Molly and Jimmy checked into the Hilton, ordered burgers and fries from room service, and spent the night lying on their respective beds watching TV in a daze until they fell asleep. At 10 p.m., Linda woke up groggy and panicked, realizing neither Jimmy nor Molly had returned her calls. "Oh, God, no," she thought. "Jimmy must know, or he would have called by now." She called their phones again, but both went straight to voicemail. She texted Jimmy saying, "Jimmy, I guess you know. Please understand it meant nothing, and I only love you. I'm so sorry, but you need to tell me Molly is safe, and we need to talk. Please let me explain." She didn't know what she would say to Jimmy. Would he want details? Should she minimize it and say it was just one mistake? She spent the next few hours thinking about how to explain herself, but received no response. Crawling under the covers, she tried to sleep, but it was a sleepless, tear-filled night filled with regret and self-hatred for what she had done. The next morning, Jimmy and Molly woke early and went down to the Hilton's breakfast buffet. Jimmy called the school to let them know Molly would be out for a few days, then contacted work to say he'd be working remotely, but was available by phone or email if needed. Looking across the table at Molly, he said, "I'm so sorry you had to see all of this. You didn't deserve to get pulled into this mess. You should have had more time to just be a kid, but now, here you are 15, and you've seen the worst side of adulthood." He continued, "I've always told you how important loyalty, honesty, and sticking to your morals is. Now you've seen how ugly things get when someone throws that away. What your mom did with Dan can't be undone. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but since you're in the middle of this, we'll figure it out together." Jimmy sighed. "I think I need to call Dan and find out what the hell is going on." He dialed Dan's number, and when Dan answered, he said, "Hold on, Jimmy, let me step outside so I don't wake Amanda." Rushing to the porch, Dan asked, "What's going on, Jimmy?" Jimmy's rage erupted. "What's going on? You tell me what's going on. No lies. Just tell me when, why, and how long you've been screwing my wife." There was a long pause before Dan finally said, "Jimmy, I'm so sorry, man. It just happened, and once we started, we couldn't stop. But it wasn't about you, Jimmy. It's not like we're in love. It was purely physical, just sex. I'm sorry, Jimmy, but it didn't mean anything to either of us. Have you talked to Linda? You should be asking her these questions." "I'm asking you. How long?" Dan sighed, defeated. "The last 10 weeks, Jimmy. Every Wednesday at your house." Jimmy's voice cracked with fury. "Why? Why would you betray me like this?" "Jimmy, it wasn't about you. Amanda's pregnant, and I wasn't getting much attention at home. I was so drawn to Linda. It started with flirting, then kissing, and eventually, we ended up in bed. I'm sorry. You need to forgive us. We'll get past this." "Forgive you?" Jimmy's voice turned cold. "Listen to me, Dan. This is how things are now between us. I will never speak to you or see you again. If I ever do, you'd better run because I will break your face. You are dead to me. I'll never feel like I have a brother again." Dan began pleading. "Jimmy, don't let this ruin our relationship. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything to me, Dan. You destroyed my marriage, my trust, and my family. Don't you dare say it didn't mean anything." With that, Jimmy hung up, deciding it was the last time he'd ever talked to Dan. Molly and Jimmy spent Thursday and Friday in the hotel room, working, ordering room service, and watching TV in silence. They tried to distract themselves, but the weight of the situation lingered between them. Occasionally, they'd take short walks to get some air. Linda kept calling, but they ignored her, not checking any voicemails. Meanwhile, Linda grew more frantic. She had been trying to reach Dan too, but he wasn't answering either. By Friday afternoon, she was at her wit's end and went to the police station to file a missing persons report for Molly. She approached the desk, clearly distressed, and said, "My daughter has run away, and I need to file a missing persons report. Can you help me?" The officer took down her information, her name, her daughter's name, her husband's name, and their address, then asked her to wait. After a few minutes, Jack Wilson, the district attorney and a close friend of Jimmy's, walked out. He introduced himself. Mrs. Jacobs, I'm Jack Wilson. Let's talk for a moment. He led Linda to a small room and asked her to sit. Mrs. Jacobs, I want you to know that Molly is fine. She's with Jimmy and he contacted me. I agreed to give him through the weekend before we take any official action on the missing persons report. Rest assured, Molly is safe, but that's all I can tell you for now. Linda's heart sank. She could feel Jack's disapproval and knew Jimmy had likely told him everything. She realized there was no point in arguing. Jack handed her his card and showed her out, his demeanor cold and distant. Linda left the station, walked back to her car, and burst into tears. Oh God, what have I done? She thought, sitting there in despair. Back at the Hilton, Jimmy looked at Molly and said, We need to at least let your mom know you're okay. Do you want to talk to her? Molly shook her head firmly. No, Dad, I don't think I ever want to talk to her again. I can't imagine any excuse or apology that would make me believe or forgive her. How could we ever trust her again? Molly, I get how you feel. We're both hurt and angry, but time will ease that. We'll have to decide if we want to try to fix this family or move on. But I think we owe her the chance to tell her side of the story. We should go home, talk to her, and see if she's willing to be honest. At the very least, we need to grab some clothes and your school stuff. You need to be ready for Monday. After a long silence, Molly finally agreed. They decided they'd head to the house on Sunday morning. Sunday arrived, and as Jimmy and Molly pulled up to the house, they both felt a deep sense of dread. The house was quiet and dim, except for a faint light glowing from the kitchen. When they walked inside, they found Linda sitting at the kitchen island, staring into a cup of coffee. She looked like she had aged a decade in just a few days. Her face was swollen, her eyes red from crying, and her hair a tangled mess. When they entered, she looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. Linda immediately jumped up, rushing toward Molly to embrace her, but Molly stepped back, raising her arms defensively. She circled the kitchen, keeping as much distance from her mother as possible. Jimmy did the same, stepping back with a stern, unreadable expression. Linda, Jimmy began, his voice cold and steady, we're here to talk about what you did and why. You've caused both of us immense pain, destroyed our trust in you, and shattered our family. I don't know if we can ever recover from what Molly saw and recorded, but I'll give you a chance to explain your side of the story. Linda began crying immediately, her hands trembling as she grabbed a tissue. She wiped her eyes and blew her nose before speaking, her voice shaky. I'm so sorry. Please understand, it wasn't about either of you. I love you both more than anything. Jimmy, it was just Zex. It didn't mean anything. It was the first and only time, and I swear it'll never happen again. Don't throw away our marriage over one mistake. She avoided Jimmy's gaze as she lied, and when she looked back, she saw the fury boiling just beneath his calm exterior. Jimmy turned to Molly and said quietly, I guess we're going with Plan B. Without saying anything, Molly left the kitchen and went upstairs to pack her clothes and grab her backpack. As soon as Molly was out of the room, Jimmy turned to Linda, his voice rising with anger. So, you're using all the standard excuses, huh? It didn't mean anything. It was one mistake. Well, Linda, you're full of crap. I talked to Dan. I know this has been going on for 10 weeks, every Wednesday, in my house. I also saw that video, and you were all in with him. So, who's lying? Him or you? Because I know it's you. Linda started to speak, but Jimmy cut her off. I told Dan he's dead to me. I'll never speak to him again. With you it's harder, but right now I feel the same way. Don't talk to me about one mistake. This was an ongoing affair, and you wouldn't have stopped if Molly hadn't walked in on you. You're more upset about being caught than about what you did. Jimmy's voice broke with emotion. You threw away our marriage the moment you started flirting with Dan and turned it into a relationship. How do you expect your 15-year-old daughter to ever deal with what she saw? I could choke you as easily as I could look at you right now. With that, Jimmy stormed upstairs to the master bedroom, leaving Linda sobbing on the kitchen floor. She curled into a ball, realizing she had made things worse by lying. She thought minimizing the affair would help, but it only enraged Jimmy more. Now, she wondered if there was any chance to save her marriage or her relationship with Molly. Minutes later, Jimmy and Molly came back downstairs with their suitcases. Jimmy removed his wedding ring, set it on the counter, and without a word, they walked out. Linda remained on the kitchen floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Back at the Hilton, Jimmy wasted no time. That afternoon, he began searching for apartments near Molly's school and his office. By the end of the day, he had secured a 6-month lease for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit with a pool, spa, BBQ grills, and a workout room. The next morning, Jimmy dropped Molly off at school and returned to the hotel to pack their belongings and check out. He moved their things to the new apartment, setting everything up for when Molly returned from school. Since it was only 6 blocks from the school, she could attend her after-school sports practice and walk home afterward. Jimmy then headed to work and called his financial planners. He began separating his finances from Linda's, moving joint savings and investments into individual accounts. He made sure a significant portion of the savings went into a trust for Molly's college fund, ensuring it couldn't be touched during the divorce. He also changed his insurance beneficiary to Molly and arranged for his parents to gain legal guardianship over her in case anything happened to him before she turned 18. 10 days later, Jimmy's financial adjustments and divorce strategy were ready. He instructed his lawyer to prepare the papers, but not serve them until he gave the go-ahead. During the last 10 days, Linda had been relentlessly calling and texting both Molly and Jimmy, pleading to talk, asking to go to family counseling, and begging them to come home. Jimmy had instructed security at his office not to let her on the property. Molly had gone to the vice principal at school and explained the situation, convincing him that Linda shouldn't be allowed on school grounds either. Around that time, Molly received a voicemail from Linda's parents that left her confused. The message implied they didn't understand why Molly and Jimmy were treating their daughter so badly over what they called a minor disagreement. They couldn't comprehend why they had moved out and stopped talking to Linda. Molly, baffled by this, decided to call Jimmy's parents to see if they knew what was going on. When she got on the phone with them, she said, "Hi, Grandma. How are things? Have you been in touch with the family? What's new? I know we haven't seen you for a while." Jimmy's parents responded that not much had changed. They were excited about Dan and Amanda's upcoming baby, and mentioned that Dan and Amanda were coming over for brunch that weekend. They even asked if Linda, Jimmy, and Molly would like to join them. Molly quickly realized that no one in the family knew the truth of what had happened. Linda hadn't told her parents anything, and it seemed Dan hadn't told Amanda or his parents the real story, unless they were being unusually forgiving. Later that evening at the apartment, Jimmy got a call from Linda's sister, Sherry. She was upset, scolding him for taking Molly and leaving Linda over what she believed was just a minor disagreement about school activities and friends. "How could you be so cruel, Jimmy? This doesn't sound like you at all." Jimmy simply replied, "There are personal issues between Linda and me, and they'll take time to work out." 20 minutes later, Linda's parents called with a similar message. "Why would you leave over a few minor arguments and disagreements?" By the end of the evening, Jimmy's own parents called and asked if he, Linda, and Dan could come over for brunch. Jimmy inquired if Dan had mentioned anything to them, and they said Dan had told them Jimmy was angry because Dan hadn't returned some tools, which led to a fight and the two weren't talking. Jimmy's mom added, "Come on, Dan, grow up. You can't fight with family over something as small as tools. Come over this weekend and make up. Besides, we haven't seen Linda or Molly in ages." Jimmy made up an excuse that Molly had an out-of-town soccer game, so they wouldn't be able to attend. Molly noticed Jimmy was trying to take the high road, but neither Linda nor Dan had been honest with anyone about what had really happened. Frustrated, she said to her dad, "It's clear that neither Mom nor Dan has told anyone the real story, and now you're getting the blame." She was angry, but Jimmy just shrugged and said, "Things will work themselves out." 2 weeks later, after deep reflection and discussions with Molly, Jimmy came to a decision. The love he once had for Linda, combined with the betrayal, deceit, and her failure to own up to her actions, was too much to forgive. On top of that, Linda hadn't taken any responsibility with her family, and neither had Dan. Jimmy realized it was over, so he asked his lawyers to serve Linda the divorce papers. Meanwhile, Linda was at home strategizing how to get Jimmy and Molly back so she could work on rebuilding their relationships. She knew she had hurt them, but she was still rationalizing that it was just meaningless sex. And since it was over, things could return to normal. She kept telling herself that they would miss her and eventually return. And when they did, she would be the most loving wife and mother possible. As she was contemplating how to approach Jimmy, she heard a car pull up outside, and then a knock on the door. Looking through the window, she saw a young man in a suit. She opened the door, and he asked, "Are you Linda Jacobson?" Worried something might have happened to Molly or Jimmy, she replied, "Yes, I am. Is everything all right?" The man handed her a manila folder and said, "Mrs. Jacobson, you've been served." He quickly snapped a photo of her holding the packet and then turned and walked back to his car. Confused, Linda went into the living room, sat down, and opened the envelope. The first page read, "Petition for divorce." Her eyes filled with tears as she dropped the documents. For the first time, she truly understood that she had likely thrown away her marriage and family for a meaningless affair. A few days after Linda got the divorce papers, Jimmy began receiving calls from all sides of the family. Linda's parents called and demanded, "How could you take her child, move out, and divorce your wife over just a few disagreements? Don't end your marriage just because you two are arguing over raising your daughter. Get together and work it out." Then Jimmy's parents called. "Jimmy, what's going on? Linda says you're divorcing her, won't talk to her, and are keeping her daughter from her. She says you're just going through a rough patch and that she loves you and wants to save the family. This doesn't sound like you. Isn't this too extreme for just a few arguments?" Then Jimmy's sister-in-law, Amanda, called and scolded him. "Jimmy, why aren't you talking to Dan over tool arguments? And why are you thinking about divorcing Linda for such small reasons? You need help, Jimmy, maybe counseling." Jimmy tried to ignore it all, sticking to one line on the phone. "This is a personal issue between Linda, Molly, and me. If you want to know why there won't be any reconciliation and why divorce is the only option for me, ask Linda." But that didn't stop the calls. They even started reaching out to Molly, telling her to return to her mother, whose heart was broken. Molly could see the pain this was causing Jimmy and how he was being cast as the villain by the entire family. She knew Dan hadn't told anyone the truth and was blaming his fallout with Jimmy on the missing tools. Molly also saw that Linda was trying to rally the family to convince her and Jimmy to return, without ever taking responsibility or revealing the real story. She knew Jimmy wouldn't. He'd let his relationships be damaged by Linda's betrayal, refusing to air the truth that could destroy Linda's relationships. Molly had enough. During study hall one day, she pulled out her computer and wrote an email to the entire family. It said, "To everyone blaming my dad for the issues between my mom, us, and Dan, it pains me to send the attached video, and I know it will shock and hurt you like it did me when I walked in on this nightmare and recorded it. It's unfair for Jimmy to be punished by the family for something he didn't do. He's been betrayed by his wife, his brother, and now by all of you. I've had enough. Please watch this and ask yourselves, what would you do if you were in my dad's shoes? What would you do if the two people you trusted most betrayed you in the worst way, lied about it, and refused to take responsibility? Watch the video privately, and then you can talk to my mom and Uncle Dan about how Jimmy should respond." She copied the entire family, her dad, and knowing he'd be upset, also Linda and Dan. Then, still angry and hurt, she hit send. Linda was at work with her phone off when she finished and went to her car. At the end of the day, she turned her phone on, expecting a message from Jimmy in response to her repeated calls, begging for forgiveness and a chance to explain. Instead, she saw missed calls from her parents, Amanda and Jimmy's parents. She listened to Amanda's voicemail first. "You cheater, you ruined Jimmy's life with your affair with Dan, and you ruined mine too. I never want to talk to you again, and if I can, I'll testify for Jimmy in the divorce. He treated you with respect, and you threw it away with your dirty behavior. Maybe Dan should come stay with you because he's getting kicked out tonight." Linda wasn't sure if Dan had confessed or what had happened, but she had a sinking feeling the family knew the truth. Her mom's voicemail was next. "Linda, how could you? I was disgusted and horrified watching that video, with Jimmy's brother in your own bed. And poor Molly walked in on her mom and uncle betraying her dad, herself, and the whole family. How could you?" Her mother then broke into sobs and hung up. Linda slumped down in her driver's seat and cried. She opened her email on her iPhone and saw the message from Molly. She didn't want to watch the video, knowing exactly what it would show, but she did so to see it from the family's perspective. It wasn't just the disgusting acts, but also hearing herself and Dan clearly. Linda knew it was over. Any hope of getting her family's help to convince Jimmy to talk to her was gone. What was she thinking? More lies, more disrespect, and refusing to take responsibility were just as damaging as the affair itself. She realized she had been fooling herself. There was no way back, not with Jimmy. He was too hurt and too disrespected. She also realized she had lost any close, loving connection with her daughter forever. She no longer had the right to act as a parent, and any advice or guidance she gave would seem like a hypocritical joke. Linda cried in the parking lot for an hour before she could start her car and drive home. 3 weeks later, Jimmy's lawyer called and informed her that since she hadn't signed and returned the divorce papers, a court hearing had been scheduled for 2 weeks. He advised her to get a lawyer and prepare. On a friend's recommendation, someone who had gone through a similar situation, Linda hired a divorce attorney. She was honest with her lawyer about her affair with Dan and how she ended up in this position. After reviewing the documents, the lawyer said, "Your husband is being fairly generous with a 50-50 split of assets. He's not hiding money or leveraging the video except for one thing. He's requesting 100% custody of your daughter. That's rarely granted, so we'll go to court, reject that part, and leave it to the judge." When they appeared in court, it was the first time Linda had seen Jimmy or Molly in 8 weeks. They looked rested, and Molly seemed older and more mature than Linda remembered. Neither would make eye contact, and when Linda tried to speak to them in the hallway, they just walked away. Linda tried to plead, saying, "I'm so sorry. Please don't hate me forever. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I can't bear the thought of you hating me forever. If you could find it in your heart to have any relationship with me, I would be so grateful." With that, they entered the courtroom and the proceedings began. When they got to the custody issue, the judge was prepared to grant the standard 50-50 arrangement. Jimmy's lawyer then asked the judge, "Your Honor, before you decide, my client's daughter has requested to speak with you privately." The judge replied, "This is unusual, but given her age, I'll allow it." Molly approached the bench with both lawyers present and said, "Please, Your Honor, I don't want to live with my mother. She's damaged our relationship beyond repair. If you give her custody, I'll run away. I won't spend a single night at her house. Please watch this short video and understand what I walked in on one day after school. The man in the video is my uncle, my dad's brother. This had been going on for months and wouldn't have stopped if they hadn't been caught." She started the video and handed the judge her phone. His expression changed as he watched. Afterward, he handed the phone back and asked everyone to return to their seats. He then said, "I'm granting 100% custody to the father as requested. No child support will be required from him, and given his income, I won't ask the mother to pay child support either. However, I will allow the mother weekly 2-hour visits with her daughter, with the first 6 months taking place during counseling sessions paid for by the father. His attendance is optional. The goal is to see if the mother and daughter can rebuild any relationship for the sake of their future." With that, the judge dismissed the court and left. Linda bent over the table, crying at the decree of 100% custody to Jimmy. Still, she held on to a faint hope that with counseling, she might be able to build some kind of relationship with her daughter and possibly even Jimmy. It was all she had left to hope for. She desperately wanted Molly to know she loved her and understood that her affair hadn't just hurt Jimmy, Molly, and the family. It had destroyed her own life. No one had been spared the pain. But perhaps the worst pain was Linda's own. 1 year later, the counseling sessions between Linda and her daughter, Molly, had been somewhat successful. Linda had gained a better understanding of why she made the choices she did, and Molly seemed to understand it through the counselor's help. While Molly couldn't fully forgive or justify it, she recognized that Linda was in as much, if not more, pain than both she and Jimmy. Despite everything that happened, Molly realized she still loved her mother, and eventually, she began spending occasional weekends at Linda's apartment and spending time with her. Linda had learned to treat Molly like an adult, allowing her to make her own decisions without criticism. They both knew that if nothing else, they would maintain a friendly relationship in the future. Linda would continue apologizing until one day Molly said, "Just let it go, leave it in the past, and let's never speak of it again." Linda often tried to get information about Jimmy from Molly, asking how he looked, if he was dating, or if he seemed happy. Molly could tell her mother still loved him deeply, but she knew Jimmy would never trust or love Linda again. So, rather than dwell on Jimmy, Molly encouraged her mother to start dating and find a fresh start. Jimmy never attended the counseling sessions. He had mended his relationship with his parents and maintained a close bond with Amanda and her kids. Amanda had left Dan and was rebuilding her life. True to his word, Jimmy never responded to any of Dan's or his parents' attempts at reconciliation. If Dan was attending any family event, Jimmy simply wouldn't show up. It had been a year since Jimmy had spoken to or seen Dan, and he remained comfortable with his decision to cut him off. Jimmy poured his energy into his relationship with Molly first and his work second. Over the past year, he hadn't dated or gone out with friends to party. Molly encouraged him to start living again, and she felt he might be getting close to rejoining the dating scene. Linda, meanwhile, still looked back on her actions with regret. A 10-week affair of meaningless sex, thrilling in the moment, had devastated the lives of everyone she loved. The guilt and pain caused by her choices would never leave her. She tried to manage her depression and guilt by becoming a better mother, daughter, friend, and employee in all her relationships. but she knew her life would never be what it once was or what it could have been. Actions have consequences, and she had been foolish not to consider them when her desire for a cheap thrill overtook her. She had thrown away the best life she could have had. She had forced her daughter to face adult pain far earlier than she ever wanted for her, and she had destroyed the love, trust, partnership, and joy she once had with her family, knowing she would never experience those things again.